I just want to make sure all this ass, you know. So is he trying to get away with stuff for us? Oh, he no better. That's first thing you said. I don't know. No, I'm just asking. He said just don't spill it. Yeah, I know. That's right. I didn't bring no little skills with me. Well, I did have my breakfast just right at my toes.
See those two young guys, I thought they were going to come in here for money, but they were listening for wise.
They look wise, huh? They look wise, huh? Just change their mind later.
Should have told them, if you figure out how to get the money, you might get the wife better.
That's it.
And, hey, you are gonna edit that thing up above, right?
No. I told you you won't see it.
I'm gonna stay over here then, where it can't get me.
It's season, it's time for season. The season.
Oh, we've got
Allergies.
allergy stuff.
I did something this morning, but I don't know if it's in there.
Holy smoly, my next section, I got
You got a lot of people.
how to influence children as an elder.
Now, can you explain, we were trying to understand what perspective that you were trying to reach? Like, for instance, is it the elder your age, or is it,
No.
it's the elders in the church?
Elders in the church influencing kids.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is a good, what I'm talking about, this is a good thing. If we convince all of the young parents to be that involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's important because I'm at that age now where my kids are now going to be having their own kids, so I want to make
Yeah,
sure,
that's-
and they're not going to be living in my house, so I'm trying to figure out, how do I influence them and I don't get to touch their lives every day all the time like I would
Right.
like.
No, I know. I know what you're saying. And there is, what has, well, are you in the next session? I won't give my spiel. She is in town, but the plane, the time they finally get in about 12:40. Yeah, this morning. Yeah, so the time we got back down, it was 1:30, 1:45. She was planning on, because it was over an hour and some late because of the other end of Dallas. And Sarah, and then there, of course, well, one advantage is that it is only 10 o'clock now, their time.
So the session after this.
There's a break, there's lunch or, break, and then the other one is in here too. Yeah.
This is where I belong.
Right. You notice what's missing here?
Men. I know, why is that? You want to join us? I'm Erica.
This is Martavis's mom. Yeah.
This
This is
is
Martavis's mom.
Don't forget I'm the aunt.
Good morning, ladies.
More ladies.
You're getting it.
Yeah, ladies. We like money. Yeah. Yeah, no, we usually on Sunday night.
These are a couple ladies that were here, and then when we actually had 3 churches start one. You're in the finance one? You're sure welcome, we're in here.
Oh, wow. Y'all like money too, huh?
Yeah, we got a couple men.
I like money too.
Yeah, just kind of sit up close and so we can be cozy and,
Hey, so good, but
so in 1992, when we had South Earth, and their pastor was old. We used to meet with them at Stan's lunch. We were just on day 12 every Wednesday. They had this. And first question asked every time, how many Bible studies?
he covers us for all the time.
So they had to take, you had to come in with a real complex or something. But anyway, what we did was we started 3 churches in one. In other words, when whoever they won, and these 2 ladies were fairly new to that, but they were working here, so they were part of the Sunday school staff. And they got their training. So we had 3 congregations going in one. And they were pastoring the people. They somebody that they had done the work they began, and the first key is how you learn to pastor. Join us up here. These folks are from our first extension church. They were even called daughter churches. Then they were from up in Chadford and out at used to be in Westchester. Yeah. See, that was their first one. Now, we used to call them outreach centers. You don't know all the background. And when the Davises left, I looked at them and said, "You're taking my little girls away from me." They're not little girls anymore. The last labor room I was in when Sandy was 74. On a Sunday night, I remember him getting decked out in the gown and all this stuff up. And I said to the Lord, "Are you sure I'm supposed to go in there?" She was having back pain because not just the normal labor. But anyway, they were the first couple I married in the church. I had a couple outside, but literally, that metal building was just got it built for their wedding. I had a lot of space. Some may wish I don't tell. I know she's headed over to the other place. I'm going to wait a little bit because there's a number of people on here. We're going to bump up against lunch, but there's an hour break there, so we have to bump into it a little bit.
Okay.
And again, I'm going to give them about 5 minutes and then we'll get started. Oh, yeah. It's been a mess for any of our folks coming from.
Yeah, and when we go to church, they close that too.
Yeah, the building on those overpasses. It's going to be good though, once they get it done, We've been here since, well, actually living in Newark since 78. I can't remember a time that they weren't doing construction.
Always, next always do it.
Understanding, and it makes it better when they've done construction.
I think they messed it up when they did it.
We had,
Yeah, they needed to do something because when they cut off that road where it used to go and made it like that, just that one lane, it is always like, oh my God, they never did that. Some of them used to be construction, isn't it? How about you involved in construction?
I got in construction already 20 Yeah, no, I had no experience at all, huh?
Yeah, I think it was
Building.
Brother Bill Lawler.
Yeah, he and I did most of the work on the metal building. I mean, we had to maintain. I used to get off about 2:30 from Chrysler and come over, and I'd already been here, and so we finished that.
How far is this church from, when I was, this church, this church, there's Lane,
Yeah, we were right, this is over time, that we made this thing go. We actually bought this property and it was starting a storefront. And that's when 16-year-old Andy walked in and he said, not want to go over to Northeast because they were mom and dad. They were really hiding. They were, you can't tell me the story. They were, mom and dad said, you gotta go to church. We want to go to this church. And this is literally in a storefront. It was like a quarter block off the UPC. It was a cool feeling. Yeah, which is up on Paper Mill Road. Yeah. Now, we're, yeah. Well, we're about 2 miles into Newark. And then, you know, it's just north of there. In fact, we were out 896, our second year. The next year and a half, we were in George Wilson Community Center, which is 896. Just across from North Campus. There's a school that City of Newark converted into a kind of a kids center, a community center.
They not.
Linda or Dorian or Sherry. She's the next one up. So those three, what happened in the storefront is we worked out a hold of their office.
You had to go back over there when they had one.
Attitude right towards the parents. So then they went to church with their parents. And Sandy actually wanted them to go. Okay, and when she did, she took them to Northeast. And then on this property now, at this time, we're in that house over there. Almost like we're not going to let it fall down until this is remodeled. We'll tear it down and make it building. Newcastle is the regulation. That's what we're doing. But so she brought me to church. Having that house. And then we built a new building. We stayed just in time for the wedding. Well, we're going to get started. Steve said I was going to have 40 in here, and I guess it's too early hour. We'll get started. Brother Little, welcome. So good to see you. In the past, because we realize related, we're going to talk about finance, and in the past when I would do these things, it would be several days, and so this is an area. You know, the question is, in a society like we're living in today, money becomes an excuse. And in the next 45 minutes or an hour, I'm going to try to summarize some things related to financial management. Let me give you some key words, and in which I'm going to key off from. One is giving. Now, I'm not here to brainwash you. Giving is not a command as it is God trying to give something that we can, even in the area where there's such influence, that we could be influenced by focusing on God. Now you have to come to you need to come to the realization that the Lord made this earth for us, but He did not make the earth for us for the earth to rule us. He wanted us to have control over the earth. And so it is not money that's the root of all evil, it's the love of it. And I have told pastors time and again, I said, there's two things you have to realize that folks are sensitive about. Their kids and their money, and that's not the order of priority with most folks. It's money and then kind of kids. And so when you deal with money, when you deal with kids, you're touching a very sensitive situation in people's lives. But what we have to realize is that God wants us to be in not a control freak, but wants us to be in control of it, not the circumstances of our life. And so as, sin entered in, and they had this beautiful garden that we can't even imagine, and they got removed from it, and, they had no sweat of the brow, and there was no pain and all of the kind of things that we're looking forward to in heaven. He wants to reinstitute with us. And so a key word is giving, and I'm going to come back to it in a minute. Second key word that I see related to finances is patience. A third one is what I was suggesting to you, who's in control, and then a plan. Now I'm going to introduce to you. I used to make plans for people. The problem is that the plan that I would make for them financially, I could do very well. See, everybody else, they need to make a plan that works for them. I still remember it. This is years ago, so I can use stories that you can't tie into people because I wouldn't. But anyway, I remember somebody was having difficulty. We'd help them some too, so they wouldn't lose their home and so on. And they came to report to me that they were having victory. They were only buying French fries at McDonald's rather than the full meal. Now, I'm not picking on McDonald's, any of you that know me, but you see the situation ends up being, we do need to occupy till He comes. And so giving, and I'm just going to believe, I'm not going to convince you about giving, but giving is an important thing in financial management. A fellow he was new to the Lord, came up to me and he said, I see tithing. He said, but I'm in such a terrible financial strait. He said, I'm going to keep track of all my tithes, and then when it gets to the place where I can afford to tithe, okay, now, this is, human logic, and, you're not, when I can afford to tithe. Well, when you can afford to tithe, never, what it appears to be, you see. So it ends up being, I said, well, how about if I suggest something to you? Give God a couple weeks. And what you're going to do in giving God, you're going to, out of faith, you're going to tithe. You're going to tithe. Came to me at the end of 2 weeks, and he said, and I can't remember if it was $15,000 or $20,000 out of nowhere, a check was sent to him. You know what I said? I said, God, you never did that for me. No, I didn't. I just had to tough it through. No, but in the midst of that, but what happens is, too, related to giving, is when the Lord does set it in order. When he does set it in order, don't forget, he did it. So, we get caught up in how things are going well. So can God trust us, you see, with good times? Now, if he can't, just buck it out until Jesus comes. But giving is a principle, and you know how long I could teach about that from the scriptures. It's so neat that it went from the law, where they booted you out of camp if you didn't give tithe, till he put it to giving out of your heart, giving out of your heart. By the way, even though, and this is where I come from, God trusts churches with souls. And that soul is worth more than anything in the world. In fact, he said, if you would lose your soul, that a soul, what would you gain if you had gained the whole world and lost your soul? So the importance of a soul. Now, we understand by experience in that money can be an obstacle. So you want to make it not an obstacle. I know at district conference, which is finishing up today, but anyway, that's a long story of scheduling, where we schedule, especially my son, he schedules a long time ahead of time, and they move conference at the last moment, and boom, on top of it. So we've had a busy few days, but that's kind of normal for things. But you see, related to money, it's between, the soul is worth more than, and in our case, we keep giving confidential because your soul is worth more. Now, we don't want you to suffer, but if you don't catch on to the giving, you're going to have some suffering. And we're sympathetic about it, but really you've got to fix it. And you're not going to fix it by us, leaning on you. So going from and just sharing about this giving process, I caught on. And I won't give you the whole bit, but I caught on. Because what happened is, I used to have to go to all the deadbeats in the Lutheran church and try to get $1 out of them a week. And I used to say to myself, I hated it. I just hated it. There's got to be a better way than this. I just needed to read the book. There was. I wasn't reading the book, the Bible. And when I found out about tithing, I thought, relief. I don't have to go money grabbing from anybody anymore. It's a giving process. So he took from the law, he put it that we give out of our heart. We give cheerfully. My wife, when we started a church, home mission churches don't have a lot of money. And if you make money, the issue, you're not going to grow very big, I think. And anyway, I used to make the statement, if you can't give it with a smile on your face, keep it. My wife would say afterwards, do you have to say that? She was taking care of the finances and, mutually together. But giving it's an attitude related to giving. I want to tell something on her. And again, she was taking a chance on this character, even hanging out with me. But, like her brother said, and he's a good guy. He said, sis, I want you to help the guy, but not marry him. You know what you're doing? But anyway, we're about 6 months into our marriage, and she has a pastor to come over to try to straighten me out because and my wife is a giving person, but I had become a fanatic about it and I'm not suggesting that you do this, But when I needed money, I gave more. And she thought, this guy has gone fanatical on me. Now here's, I'm new in the Lord. She's 13, 14 years. And so she calls the pastor. Can you imagine as a pastor coming into somebody's home and the wife is saying, would you please tell my husband to stop giving so much to the church? He's out of balance. But anyway, Sister Pearl, you need to get upstairs. Fellowship Hall. One of the classes, you mean? Fellowship Hall. Yeah, the other two are over there. Okay, so what happens is giving, it has to be a personal, it is a personal thing between you and God. I know it's a personal thing, but I would suggest you really get a hold of it. Because what happens is, when you give of tithes and offerings, you're not giving out of necessity. You're not giving grudgingly. Now your flesh is going to strain against you. Especially if you're in a tough time, you see. And so what you want to do is you want to overcome it by giving, by getting a good attitude towards it. And we're not in competition. I know at our district conference, some of the home mission churches, as they're displaying who gives to how much and so on, the different, they were saying, it's kind of unfair that, we're giving and it looks like we're not giving. The problem is I wanted to jump up there and say, would you please come on Saturday morning to my class on finance, and I will deal with that attitude. All right. Yeah, because it isn't about that. What it is about you and Jesus, and what you're doing is you're using it as a spiritual discipline so that your focus is on Him. That doesn't mean you don't need food and raiment. And some, in our society today, we're not living in tents and nomads drifting around. So, and we need to get between places, and how you don't live within the community of where you worked and where you shopped, and so you could walk every place like I grew up, actually, with our family not having the cars. So the Lord understands our needs. Now, let me give you the second word, which I gave to you already, is called patience. Now, we messed it up for decades, and God's going to fix it in a day. Now, if He fixed it in a day, He would really have some spoiled children. He would. So it's called patience. Patience. Because He wants you to do well. And really our success, our accomplishments or things in this world, He doesn't really want it tied into the finances. I was sharing last night in the session that I had. I was sharing with them about Steve when he was a kid. He thought once he got a store-bought haircut, he thought we were really in the money. Because every time I said it's haircut time, he started crying because I cut his hair. I wanted to cry because my wife was cutting mine, and it was awful. Nobody ever saw the back of my head. You would never get a chance to look in the back of me. It was this way. Not only the back of my head, but the coat that she got at a yard sale that had a bow on the back of it. I was wearing a coat with a bow on the back of it, and my wife's hair cutting skills, which was awful. I never looked at it myself either. Ignorance was bliss and that kind of thing. But once we could go get to the barber, man, we arrived. But we're laughing about it now, and Steve will laugh about it now too. He'll say, I was using a comb with a razor blade in it. He said, Dad wouldn't even put a new razor blade in, using the one that pulled my hair. But anyway, the point point of what I'm saying is patience. Because what can happen is, and I'll just suggest this with you, the world we're living in wants you to spend money beyond your income. They do. Do you realize that CDs, you might be able to get 0.1% on a certificate of deposit? Who's regulating that? The government. They don't want you saving money. They want you spending it. Now, who's responsible for what you spend? You are. Now, I used to make, you know, pastors are first in, last out. I mean, we used to talk about that on inventories, because there's accounting principles too, like that you regulate how you use your inventory of how much you can charge somebody for materials. So you want to charge them for the highest price, even though they were not the last in or the first in, and so any of that kind of thing. But I was first in, last out. I had no idea what cars people were driving. I know the lady that was trying to get upstairs, she was always embarrassed about the cars that I was driving. Pearl. I mean, and it was just a choice. But anyway, I used to make this statement. I'm not bothered by what car you drive. You want to drive a BMW or a Porsche or a Jaguar? So it isn't any of my business. I just don't want to have to pay for it. Turns out I learned a lesson. Don't mention the types of cars, because you don't know what's in your parking lot. So one lady got majorly offended because she thought I was picking on her. But anyway, we worked it out. She's still in the church and things. But it's really, but patience. Do you know, the 7 years from conversion to when we moved east, when I saw these young preachers, and I was 30 years old and old at the beginning of that. Your perspective kind of changes at different times. I'm still young, Mark. Thank you. I knew you would agree with me on that. That's why I picked you out. Okay. People keep telling me, man, you're looking good. I would think, I wonder compared to what? Okay. But patience, what happened is, when God put you on the fast track, and He's setting you up for a purpose in your life, don't get caught up. Don't get caught up in the money charge. And fortunately, I had married a very frugal lady, and between the two of us, we didn't get caught up in that when I got on the fast track. So people today, they're wondering how we're supporting all those missionaries. Most people are convinced that I am a hidden. I have hidden assets I had when I first came. And the truth of the matter was, I was out of debt. So the assets part was kind of puny, but the debt part was in good shape. Okay, but the patience kind of thing is, you do not have to go into debt, especially out of impulse, so you can have today and not wait for tomorrow. Now, I joke about, hey, did any of you guys ever had pants that buttoned instead of zipped? Anybody had a pair? Marquez. So you did too. Yeah. My wife found at a yard sale a wool suit that looked in great shape. It had a button fly. It had to be pre-World War II. It was. Yeah, when you met me, we were living in those conditions and things about. So button pants. Now, if I hadn't been as old as I was, I wouldn't have realized. So I had a suit coat with a bow on the back of the coat, and then I had one that I had to unbutton my pants to go to the bathroom. It's true, though. Now, in the things, I mean, we could have had some pity parties and that. But you know what? She found a place. Because, tuna fish sandwiches on Sunday afternoon kind of grow old a little bit. I still like tuna fish sandwiches. I wasn't going to have her make, she was working as hard on Sunday morning, teaching a Sunday school class, and then the music and all the stuff. So we was having 2 services, and then the one in the evening. And that, so, tuna fish and some soup. I could even, that was pre-microwave, so you had to do a little bit, you had the pot on the stove rather than in the microwave. But man, when I was single, if we had microwaves, I felt I was in heaven. Because I used to I'd cut the can, top off the can, stick it on the stove, so I wouldn't have to wash any pots. But I don't know. I'm probably discrediting myself and say, I don't want to listen to one thing this guy's saying. But I'm talking about patience. Before I let her see where I was staying, after she had agreed, after I'd come to the Lord and she had agreed to marry me, and that before she got to see the apartment she was going to move into, I moved my cinder blocks and 2x4s that were my bookcase out of the place. I thought that would probably be beyond the breaking point. She gave cinder blocks. One of the guys that worked for me at work had put up a wall, and he had some extra cinder blocks that he gave me. And I was using 2x4s for a bookcase. Those were the good old days when I was extremely poor. Patience. I remember going in and pounding on the desk. I was 27 years old, and I had been made supervisor of a group 8 guys, 7 of them my senior. And I knew that at least 7 of those guys were making more money than me, and they were working for me. How come? I had graphs of how I was doing financially. That wasn't a plan. That was obsession. I've kept it. You can tell when I came to the Lord, the graph stopped. What I'm talking about is patience. Patience. Because when God blesses, you see, you're in more of a crisis when God will bless than you are before when you are by necessity trying to get it together. You're at more risk related to patience and the right attitude towards finance after you've made the round where God has blessed your life. What are you going to do then? Go back to the previous word, give. I heard about, in fact, it was on Focus on the Family, and I don't normally, this is years ago, a medical doctor who had come to God, and he had realized he was obsessed with money. He laid out a plan, his basic necessities, and he was probably living a standard of living that all of us would have said, yeah, okay. But he did, and he gave everything else away. Now, I'm not telling you to do that. But what you want to do is you want to be patient. A key to good financial, let's see, the title of this is, My Tree Isn't Growing Much Money. I didn't make up that title. I would have titled something different. Yeah, but is it, how do we manage with where we're at? Okay, it's patience. We had a problem when we went to get any kind of financial accrediting kind of thing. The city of Newark gave us a break because I had no financial record. I'm talking about after we came here. People say, well, you got to get a credit card or you can't get any credit rating. I've never checked what my credit rating is, but the Lord's always worked out. I had no credibility financially. 7 years of patience positioned us that we didn't need credit. Now, I tell my wife, I mean, and we're not skinflints. We're not, as far as management. And we don't expect the present generation to be in the same kind of structure that we were as far as tightness of finance. But it wasn't a sacrifice. Because in the midst of patience, God had. The guy told me, the manager of research, told me when I pounded on his desk and said, this is unfair. He pulled a chart out and he said, we're not going to ruin you by jumping you up here, but you're on the fast track. 2 months later, he got transferred, and I thought, well, that promise went out the window. But it didn't. It did not. Hercules Incorporated paid for by getting us out of debt the start of this congregation, and I did not know it. I was walking in faith. See, I can tell the stories about was walking in faith. Brother Littles can attest that, compensation at a Bible school or teaching in a Christian school is really high pay position. Yeah, but see, it wasn't a strain. Because of patience. Isn't it interesting, for instance, that it's interesting that you can make a car payment, and if I said $200 or $250, everybody's saying, "Man, what dinosaur is he?" But anyway, but whatever that car payment, you see if you can do that instead of being dissatisfied with, and I'm not picking on cars. I learned my lesson about mentioning. Okay, but you can actually get to the place where you're making a payment to yourself and buying for cash and not paying interest. You're making interest. This building here, because we waited 3 years to start a building project, instead of costing us $643,000, it cost us less than $300,000. Because we didn't go into debt. And we literally saved over $300,000 up front. Because we pushed the chairs together over there. And Stan Seth had to sit on the aisle because he had to put his legs out in the aisle. But, it was uncomfortable. Said to the ladies in the church, when we started building this one, and that, as they were getting together, figuring out what kind of kitchen we were going to have, Dee was there, so she remembers. She's laughing now, but she wasn't laughing then. We ain't going to have any kitchen until you get your attitude right. This is about souls, not food. The car, yeah, all kinds of stuff. It isn't. You see, it's patience. It's amazing. Compound interest is amazing. But even where we're at here economically in that, giving patience. I'm going to give you, do you realize that you have some control over what you make? Okay, and I know jobs are tough and all the kind. You have some control over it. See, I grew up in the area when John F. Kennedy, I was in school when he made the declaration, we're going to the moon first. So jobs, the government started pouring money in. Guys that were in my business, they would stay with the company a couple of years. At the time they got their annual raise, they would change jobs and get another raise by changing jobs. Do that a couple of times, you got a pretty healthy, inflated salary. Except when the crunch came, they got the axe. So things, So I have never known the strain of this generation, where you can be what's going on in Delaware right now. is 7 law students out of Wagner are now suing that school for false representation of jobs because the number 1 student several years ago can't get a job as a lawyer, a lady. So we're in different, so I'm not, we have to deal, but the principle still works, you see. So who is in control? What you want to be is you're going to be patient so you can get on the plus side of the economic situation. And then what do you do now? Income is majorly subject to others. Okay? And you can negotiate and so on. But especially, there are jobs, but they're not. Apparently, what is being offered to people is a whole lot less than what they anticipate they're worth or what they really are worth or all the things. I knew of an engineer at Bethlehem Steel up in Johnstown that at the age of 53 got laid off because they could hire a couple of younger engineers. See, the attitude has changed, but God hasn't changed. But the key, the thing that you can have control over is what it's costing you to live. Expenditures are under your control. Now, obviously, I'm not, naive enough to say that things are, that you don't need a place to live and that you don't need food and so on. But you have to see, the solution for the world is, give me more money. And the solution for God is, learn how to live where you're at. Yeah. And take the tough steps. I mean, the value meal at McDonald's just couldn't give up the whole thing, had to have French fries. But and I'm not picking that demonstrates. Because what happens is, as you go through and as you're trying to position yourself so that your life can be secured financially and your responsibilities to people. Right. And so expenditure. So we're talking about the control issue, not being a control freak, but that you're responsible for it. So if that is true, therefore, the smaller the indebtedness, the greater control. Got what I'm saying to you? Now, I told you, I confess to you, it was 7 years. I did not realize that in that what God was doing, we developed the principle. We were married in February. In October, I told my wife, who was also working at the same place that I want you to quit. We spent about 8 months, every time we got together, trying to convince the other one that they shouldn't marry the other one, because of what we were bringing into the relationship. But one thing that I said to her, and I know this is old-fashioned, I'm not picking on anything related to 2 incomes and ladies working outside the thing, but for our family, I told her, we're not going to have a house. The situation that I've gotten myself into, and I could have pointed fingers and stuff, but that's out of my control, related to other people's responsibility in the whole situation. But I needed to take responsibility for where I was. And I said, but I'm going to take care of you. You're not going to have to worry about. Now, she was willing to live at that situation. Fortunately, the Lord had given her love for me that she probably naturally wouldn't have picked. But anyway. Hey, let me tell you something. After 43 years, and those blue eyes, not only looking at me, but that she's glad I retired. Don't mean St. Louis so many times. But when I was in St. Louis, she would say, I miss you. I can't wait till you get home. You want to hear that? That's what's important. And I have been a piece of something to live with. She will tell you it has not been boring. It's been exciting. The important thing you see, but remember talking about you're going to focus on God because He cares about you. You're going to be patient, where you're making decisions, not impulsive, but patient. If you're guilty, confess to God. Don't confess to me. Most people that confess to me want me to give them money. I'm sympathetic. But, okay. And then what you're going to do is you're going to position yourself. You're going to position yourself. We had no idea when we made the investment in the church town, not where I worked, but in the church town, where we were a quarter mile from the church. Had no idea either that the guy who was supposed to be driving the bus 20 miles up the river would quit. And so on Sunday, I lived a quarter mile from church, and I would drive up, pick the bus back. So I was driving 80 miles, living a quarter mile from church, so some kids and old folks along the river could come to church. But I'm talking about attitude about things. Yeah. So the smaller the indebtedness, the greater the control. Vice versa, the higher income you are dependent upon, the more others are in control. Did you get that? Now, you don't need to feel guilty. The higher the income that you need to live on, the more others are in control, not you. That doesn't mean you can't have high income and low indebtedness. Then what it does is that you can really give. Yeah. So the higher the income, the more somebody else is in control. Now, what you have to do, everybody deserves to have mad money. Mad money means it's yours. And you can blow it. Now, mad money for my wife when she married me was $5 a month. Okay, now you know it was in the 1970s, and so it meant a lot, but it wasn't any more than about $25. It's not 5 times anything, but she had some mad money. You don't want to be so obsessed that you're not living. I had counseled a couple, and it was obvious that she had the better skills at managing the budget, and so you turn the check over, have a joint plan that you're working on, but she's going to control it. So what he would do is he would get his check, cash it, go out and spend all the mad money that he thought he should have, and give her the rest and say, manage it. That ain't the deal. Okay, now, wherever you're at, see, I had no idea in the beginning when we started this process personally. And by the way, I've been able to see a whole lot of lives in many different situations, even from less than minimum wage to folks in 6 figures, and all of them lives being controlled by finances rather than they control it. So you control your expenses with the present income. Get on the economic positive side. In other words, get out of debt. You need to have accountability. I resigned from doing that before I retired from pastoring. There's a lot of, advice. I have, and I'm not against financial planners and so forth, but man, it'd be a whole lot better if they were making things instead of advising you how to invest your money. Now that's just So you want to be financially accountable some way. And, giving puts you in a position like that. You want to position yourself so that this day is the Lord's day. And however long it takes for you to get there, it is worth it. Okay, let me give you, now I'm going to talk about a plan. Most people don't know where their money's going. I permanently messed Ben Cohen's head up. And the reason about that is when he was a kid hanging out with me, we would be walking along the parking lot and there was a penny and I said, "Pick it up, Ben." You still pick up pennies? You don't? Uh-oh. Shame, shame. You know what he would do? He hated change. So, but he had to pick it up and he'd give it to me. We'd be on a trip and he said, do you want my tithes now? Or do you want it back in church? And he didn't like carrying change in his pocket or something. He'd give it to me. Now, I understand about me that when I go to McDonald's and the guy hollers out, "Thank you," a nickel. Sarah, you're after my own heart. She's my adopted granddaughter, by the way. Sometimes she agrees to that. Other times, when I'm on her side, she really agrees to that one. So it is, you see, it has to fit you. But you have an objective, and that's that you want to be financially free. Doesn't mean that you don't have to work or you don't have to, whatever the adjustment had to be. Every year, what happened is we were at a Bible school for 3 Bible school that was free gratis and teaching high school that got paid. As we started the Home Missions Church, 2 of those years. And then, fortunately, somebody has suggested to me, and I had given the Christmas for Christ all year, but they suggested we apply for Christmas for Christ, and so we got it. And which meant a decrease in pay, not an increase. But anyway, we had positioned ourselves that way. And every year my wife would say, because she was looking at the facts of things, "Well, looks like we're doing all right this year, but next year you're going to work." Like I wasn't working anyway, but I mean, you're going to work. You're going to go to work. I have to remember this afternoon and say, "Hey, hon, next year do I have to go to work?" Because what happened is we had a plan. The plan just wasn't for us, but it was for the church. And I encourage you have a plan, because you can't do everything and at once. See the timing of things. Does it have to be now? Or do you just want it now? Now, if you can afford it now, go for it. Yeah. But would it be a better day and not be obsessed with the thing? So now where to start? You have to know where the money's going. So you track it. Yeah. And as tight as you have to do, if you use envelopes or electronics or however you do it, receipts or what, you track it. You find out for several months where it's going. And then you look at, you honestly look at what you're doing. And say, is this, not only is this necessary, but it really is it expedient? Is this really good? Are there things there that are obsessing my life? is it? So you eliminate what I have on my paper here, carnal expenditures. Yeah. Now, because I choose to drive an old car, I mean, it's not old. Well, yeah, even when I buy it, it's old. But I'd make that choice. You can buy a new car if you want to. I'm not trying to tell you that. But what you have to do is realize, how does it impact your life? How long does it stay new? I was illegally parked, but waiting for my wife at the library, and in Newark Library, and all the slots were filled up, but I could have parked way down, and then I wouldn't know she came out, and all the kind of stuff. So I'm parked illegal along the one side, and this lady gets in her car and backs up into me. Now, what it did is, I thought to myself, man, I'm glad I'm not driving a new car. It was just a little bump or something, and she's nervous as everything, and imagine she's thinking about, man, what's my husband going to say when I come home and say I ran into this guy and everything. And I got out, and it was dark, but I could see there was just a crack in part of the molding and stuff. And if you look at the car out there now, you can find it if you look hard. And I still remember it was a blessed day, because I looked at her and said, it's all right. And she did that. That was worth the crack in the molding on the car. You know, money management techniques. You know, don't try to remember all this stuff. You're going to track your expenditures so you know where you're spending money. You're going to delegate primary money control to the best manager. This is for, if you are it, then you better be the best manager. Eliminate impulsive spending. Establish a budget. Can be very simple. It's what you want to track so that you know what you're doing. And the reason is because you want freedom. You have a plan. Now, I always tell this story on my wife. I'm going to tell it again. She was going to be here and I wouldn't tell it, but I'll tell her I told the story again. But that my wife, the way we found this property is that Church of Christ used to run a resale shop, and that's where Stephen got clothed, out of that resale shop when he was a kid growing up. And she had this Tootsie Roll bank in the closet, and that was Stephen's clothes money, because she recycled his clothes in there and things. And if you ever wonder why he is the way he is, we kind of contributed to it. Haircuts and changing the muffler in my slanted driveway and me changing it. Oh, I think when we got to a place where I could go and get repairs on the car without, because I was awful. I mean, you ever tried to take a muffler off with just a pipe wrench and a channel locks or something like that and a hacksaw? And then you had to put the new one on and stuff. And I thought, Lord, if I ever get to use a mechanic, I'm going to thank you but then I went ahead, and so when I was able to take cars, every time I go to a mechanic, I say, thank you, Jesus, I've arrived. Every time I go to the barber shop, I say, oh, yes, Lord, I don't have to worry about the back of my head. I mean, the stuff that, I mean, here you establish a budget. And if you have credit, if you have, and most likely you have, and you don't have to indicate if you don't have a credit card and that, but best thing to do is throw them away, but pay them off and come up with a plan. I knew one young lady in the church that every Friday she was so thankful that she made it through the week that she had to go buy a pocketbook. Didn't have any money to put in it, just had a pocketbook to get around. And if you're not that way, by the way, if you marry somebody, you need to have your list. Top of Steve's, he had 2 pages of what his wife had to be. I said, if you find somebody like that, they're not going to accept you. You better lessen that list, or they won't have you. Yeah, your list better not eliminate you. So it got down to 3 items or something. I forget. But at the top of the list is, my wife shall fix all my meals. So when he's in the basement, you maybe have been there when he goes, Reg, where's my sandwich? His mother and I did it to him. Yeah. So what is you need a plan. You need what's important to you. My brother-in-law, a conservative guy, you know what he had on his list? My wife shall clean out my paintbrushes. Yeah, that's the retired pastor from Mantua, guy that founded that church. Yeah, my wife. I mean, I don't know. My wife, that was important to him. Second thing I think, now his sister's the one that told me this stuff. He wasn't going to reveal this to me. The second thing on the list was, she shall fix my breakfast no matter what time I get up. You say, well, what a nutcase. No. I mean, what I'm trying to say is you can have your own peculiar stuff. You used to tell Steve, leave the thermostat alone in our house. So I go down there. I'm freezing to death in his house. I go up. We're sitting where the dining room table used to be. I went up and turned the thermostat up. He said, do I have to kick you out of my house? You told me. See, he's quoting back to me. He remembers everything. You said when I got my own house, I could set the thermostat. Keep your hands on my thermostat. So you better be careful what you're setting, you see, because you might come back to reap it. But develop a plan for paying off credit cards. The ones that have the highest interest, I've known people, they offer you a plan. No interest for the first 2 months. So you borrow to the hilt to pay off the highest interest, and then it jacks up to whatever the government lets you do at 23.5. Hey, when mortgage rates went to 6%, I almost had a stroke. When the Dow Jones went over 1,000. If you don't know what the Dow Jones is at now, it's, 14 something. 14, huh? It made 15, yeah. So when it went over 1,000, I thought, this country's in trouble. No company's worth that. What the stock market is supposed to reflect is how the value of that company, not the inflated value of that company. And because we've gotten in trouble, and I'm not here to teach an economics lesson. Steve comes home and said, I've had an economics class. He was taking an economics class. University of Delaware, as a freshman, he came home and said, Dad, I need to go into debt and pay it off with cheaper money or more expensive money or something like that. Because it's going to go up. The value of the dollar is going to go down or something, and I'll pay it off with cheaper money. I said, I have a basic question for you. What about the interest? He got a credit card for a liter of Pepsi. Yeah, on the University of Delaware campus. He's come on the campus. Liter of Pepsi, sign up for a credit card. I need a credit rating. Sure. When? What are you going to buy? You see, they're out there to get you, is what I'm telling you. They're going to tell you, you won't be able to buy a house if you don't run up credit card debt. I bought a house. They lie. Or they twist the truth at least. And number one, and I need to quit because it's 5 after 12, but we started late. But anyway, pay yourself. Have you ever heard about, and I forget what it's called now, Brother Littles, if somebody can help me with it. They not only tithe under the law, but they had what was the other tithe that they partook of? Well, anyway, I need to go back and study that some more. Kind of stupid to bring it up when I couldn't remember it. But anyway, they were blessed. It wasn't just the manna. Can you imagine grocery shopping in front of your tent every day? Just picking it up. And they developed an attitude. When income increases, maintain same standard of living. Patience. Patience. Man. Because really it's about people. That's why you want to manage it. It's really about people. And God is interested in us. And I have watched all levels of income be applied, these principles over a period of time being applied. And watch the hand of God bless people's lives. Let me tell you something else that happens to Christians. They hit a bump or a mountain in the road. I am not telling you that God does that. But He will use it for good, but it really checks our attitude out. I felt so guilty when we came east, because when I was looking at the quantity of the gifts, I'm talking about tithes and offerings, I felt ashamed. Because what I was doing is actually comparing against myself. And I felt ashamed. And the attitude was wrong. And I wasn't trying to, the attitude was wrong. So He really wants us to have the right attitude so He can bless us and take care of us. You know, and again, even when we got the microwave, now, I was going to, Kool-Aid and popcorn around a board game at night with your family cost practically nothing except time and attention. You talk to my son. Down at Kent, when he was going to school there in the school, he would come up to me and say, how come I get this lunch pass and never have to pay anything? I said, don't worry about it. The Lord's good. We're below the poverty level. You wouldn't have known it. We didn't have a poverty attitude. I remember my wife. Can you imagine ashtrays in a Christian's car end up being the garbage can? Okay. Okay. But in our car, I remember my wife coming in and she had pulled out the garbage can, the ashtray in the car, and found $5 there. Now, we didn't put it there. Say, $5, what's the deal? Oh, the Lord cares. The Lord cares. It was not only, I'm just talking about some things that people could have said, well, poor you. No. It wasn't that. We had gardeners in our church. They didn't realize that they weren't giving us extras. They were giving us the real deal, food for our meal. But now, reflecting back on it, it isn't with, it wasn't. That's why I say, and I can't say it strong enough, if you think it's a sacrifice to serve God, you got to change your attitude. You got to realize it isn't, it's a privilege. I don't make a big deal about, as fundraisers go on, and people are for real, and they talk about sacrificial giving. I've never found it that way. Really, it isn't. Now, I'm an odd guy. You've probably figured that out by now. If you haven't, you got to get more perceptive. It's a privilege. A privilege. It's about people. You're important to God, and He cares for you. And there's no money, but we have to. You can't take your pet dog and go barter it for a loaf of bread. No, we're dealing, but let it be the means, not the end. And He will help you in it. And piece by piece, and what happens out of it, you develop that relationship with God. And remember, you are part of the purpose of God right now, right where you're at now, in your life, where you're situated in that. But He's not done with us, and He positions us. He positions us. And you take all the junk of the past. Anybody got junk in the past? You take it. Some your own deal, some other people, and whatever. You take all of that, and you put it into Christ. And if He doesn't take it away, He's going to use it to help somebody else. And what you're doing with finances, what you're going to do is position yourself that the Lord is the Lord of your life, not the struggle for existence here in this world. And we're living in a confused world, and economics money is the way that things are being controlled. Short term, what you want to do is you want to provide daily financial control to enhance a stress-free life. Let the stress be suffering for souls with Christ Jesus. Long term, eliminate debt as much as possible. Okay, and again, hope you got some thought. Something that, and don't try to swallow the whole piece. Because if you get in the right direction, what happens is He moves you that way. He moves you that way. And even though the path is narrow, it's safe. It's safe. And He loves us. And He wants you to be in a place where the standards of the world are not defining your value. Yeah. Kids, when teenagers, when I was teaching them, and they find out the background about, the rocket business and those kind of things. One kid said, "Why didn't you stay in it, make a whole lot of money, and then work for the Lord?" Yeah, why didn't I? No, because Dee Nidline and Jan Tompkins and Ethel Stike and Diane Birchfield, and a couple years later Becky Cohen, and that they needed a pastor now, not later when everything looked convenient. And I'm not drawing attention to me, I'm drawing attention to God. Because He loves you. He has purpose for your life. Amen. We're going to take a 45-minute break. And there's a couple classes going over there. We had, if you weren't able to come last night, there were about 50-some kids here for Brother Squires. And we had good class. This is a start for us in trying to, because of God's blessing upon our congregation, we have been extending it into our community of folks that have been associated with us who know they're safe here. We're safe here to be able that we join together and be able to be a blessing to counteract the attack on the family. starting with the children, starting with whatever state a person's in. And of course, money ends up getting more attention than it needs to get. It needs to get attention, but not all the attention that it's getting. Amen. So that you're in control and that you can lay down at night and say, thank you, Jesus, for this day. Amen. This one I know is... This one can. This is being recorded. Is Steve recording? No, I know they didn't because... Right. This one's video, so... Sister Becky. Yeah, or you can go out to McDonald's, or you can fast, or wherever you want. It's now. Yes, 1 o'clock's the next class, and I overran by about 15 minutes or so. So you are dismissed. Thank you for being here. By the way, everything that we've ever done here started like this. The world says you got to have a big crowd. And the church says every person's important. Right. As I folded my underwear yesterday. Now listen to me about this. I had realized that we were in the midst 25 years ago or 30 or whatever it was, in the midst of a growing single adult population. So we started, our first care group was a single adults group. And one of the ladies, who some of you might know because she was in your congregation, she was with him, Patty Salmons. This was before John was in her life. Patty Salmons, at one of the single adult meetings over in that house, suggested that the males in your life need to fold their own underwear, because that's what she did with her 2 kids. So last night, in front of Brother Squires and Steve's home, I saw him sitting there folding his underwear. He folds them really neat. And yesterday, because we were having company and I had to fold my underwear. Poor me. Glad you came, every one of you.